Every time we sit down for a dinner, lunch, group, with friends, nobody eats when the food is served. Why? Because everybody wants that Instagrammable picture of the food that has been laid out on the table, and everybody wants to click it. So that's where Scott comes in to tell you that please enjoy your food. Pictures will keep coming. Look at the experience. But food is something that we relate to, right? Every time you meet a new person, you have an experience, you're traveling to a newer place, you do two things. You click pictures and you want to experience food in that region, in that place, because food is what brings you closer to the culture, to the ethos of the place, to the people. So let me ask you, what was the best thing you ate in the last 2 days of the conference here? Anybody? Nobody ate anything? Yes, sir. Sushi. Great. So sushi was the best. What about anything else? Yes, sir. I can't hear you. I'll bring the mic to you.
My question is, what authentic local food did you try?
Here is a local person with a question.
Sorry?
Hummus.
I apologize, but that's not local food. That's Lebanese. Yes, our local Emirati food is very different. Huh? Nothing stops you from exploring. Yes?
Great. Thank you so much. So that's where the experience of travel comes in, is when you experience food. And I have two lovely women to talk about how food, is what brings travel and tourism and the experiences we build, all of it together. For the next session, the power of sustainable gastronomic tourism. The interviewer, Stephanie Zubiri, right? Editor and contributor, Tatler Homes Philippines, Philippine Star. And she is in conversation with Audra Morrice, Masterchef Asia and Singapore host and judge, cook and author. Audra, please welcome on the stage. I've heard both of you. And Audra, I must say, your talk yesterday at the reception dinner, when you were talking about oysters and locally sourced food, so the moment you started speaking about locally sourced tomatoes, everybody on my table were like, oh, tomatoes were served, and we may have missed it earlier, but then we went and we experienced it and tried it, and it was really great, so thank you.
Was it more delicious after that?
It was, because we exactly knew what we were eating there. So thanks for that conversation, and we look forward to the conversation around food.
Fantastic. Hello,
Two
everybody.
lovely ladies.
Thank you so much, Archana. So, hello, everybody. We're back. I just want to give a little bit brief background of what I do. So, I love to eat. And because I love to eat, I love to cook. And I actually started my career in journalism writing about my favorite subject, which is food. And when Liz called me and asked me to moderate originally just this panel, she said, you will love Audra. She loves to cook, she loves to eat, and we will get along. And Audra and I were sort of messaging, and we just hit it off right away. She said, I'm going to the market. I'm like, you're my kind of girl. Because the market is really where you can see the culture of a place and the people and how they interact and how a country smells. I love markets. So I have the pleasure to have with me
Except she fell
Audra.
asleep on the beach.
I fell asleep. Yes, I know. I couldn't go. I was jet lagged. But she will tell us all about this. Okay, so Audra, you and I had this conversation before we dig deep into this topic and get technical. We were talking about how important cuisine is, and I wanted to start with a quote from my favorite author, food writer, MFK Fisher, who said that, breaking bread, sharing a meal with another human being is an intimate act that should not be indulged in lightly. And that's because we share so much of ourselves when we eat. And we were talking about how cuisine is this vehicle into a country's history, culture, agriculture, and heritage.
So I was born in Singapore. I was born into a family of my mother's Chinese, my father's Indian. And when you grow up in Singapore, it's a multicultural. The thing that attracts you to other people's houses is what their mothers cook, right? And you know, I had Punjabi friends, I had Chinese friends, and within Chinese friends, I had friends who were Cantonese, Hakka, Teochew, and everybody has their own cuisine. But what's amazing is during a Christmas period or whenever there's this feast happening, that could be half a dozen cultures sitting around a table. It's all you do, it becomes irrelevant who you are, but you're just focused on the food that you eat. And I always think that dining and feasting together it brings people together, it breaks down barriers, you become so much more accepting of differences, and you look for that positive difference, that enjoyable difference, rather than the differences that everything else is irrelevant, you know? So for me, culture of a food, a culture of a nation or a country or a people, it's so easy to use food to actually discover that, you know. It's such a good vessel, and that has been my vessel my whole life, and especially so in the last 10 years.
And you know, when we cook, it's not just about the dish, right?
No.
It's also about how is the dish served? Is it family style? Is it small plates?
Yeah.
Did we stew it all day, or are we grilling it in the background?
Yeah.
Where do the spices come from? They ground it up. And you know, one of the things people don't realize, and I think this is where we'll bridge into sustainable gastronomic tourism, is that the ingredients we use, the agriculture behind it, shapes the physical landscapes that you actually see. And when you go to the countryside, you see these physical landscapes of heritage, of agriculture, and the history of a country, right?
Correct.
So, you know, let's talk about this topic of sustainable gastronomic tourism. What exactly is it in your head?
Right.
How do you define that?
Let's just go back to what you mentioned before. You know, once I told you guys that those tomatoes were grown locally, did it not taste that much more delicious, and you were so much more interested in it? So I always feel that gastronomy is really the study of food, of the relationship between food and culture. Yeah. So when you actually delve deeper into the food that you eat, it's connected to the culture. And when you sing and scream loud about that culture or that dish, people become so much more educated about it. So when we talk about gastronomy being in tourism, and we tag on that sustainability word in front of it, it's really about engaging or educating the traveler. It's as much about educating the traveler as it is about educating the local community to support that. You know, you can't have one without the other. And I so feel strongly about the fact it's a two-way street. You know, when you're educated about a cuisine, you actually become so much more involved, and you enjoy that experience, and that dining experience will change your life.
And you know, there's so much relationship as well now especially with this sort of local movement,
Correct.
right? I'll use the example of the Philippines. When I started as a journalist over a decade ago, as a food journalist, everything on the menu was imported. Chilean sea bass, beef from wherever, everything was doused in white truffle and foie gras. All the best chefs in the Philippines today are really looking to ancient cooking techniques, traditional ingredients, searching for that sort of farmer that just makes that one type of fern that goes into a salad. And I think there's this movement now in many countries that are chef-driven, especially by the younger chefs, that can be capitalized in tourism, where you really go from the table to the plate.
I mean, let's talk about the way food is cooked today. Traditionally, caveman period, you know, everything was cooked over flame. Then we moved into gas, then we moved into induction. I'm not a big fan of cooking on induction.
I
but
hate it. I burn everything.
Correct. So now it's if you notice, the Dave Pints of this world, or everyone's moving back to cooking over charcoal or wood. And what you have to realize is not just a fad. The flavor that you get from a char-grilled piece of meat or vegetable is so much more than just cooking it in a pan or in the oven. I mean, just go and try this out. So I think what we're basically saying is that we're almost going back to the old days of the way we cook, because then it's not about how many minutes do I have to sous vide that piece of meat for. It's about the feel and touch, you know. And as a diner, you should look into that a little bit more. You should actually search out the restaurants that actually, or the street vendor that actually cooks fresh stuff on the fly, that just this morning, you know, collected all that beautiful greens from the market down the road. Somebody grew it in the, you know, whatever it is. So from a gastronomic tourism perspective, sustainability is not really about, I mean, if we strip the word back to its basic form, it's really about the ability, and I think Peter touched on this earlier, it's about the ability to kind of maintain a current status for many years to come. I mean, if we put it in pure layman's terms. And how are we going to allow people to enjoy this beautiful cuisine or this beautiful culture for many years to come? We've got to do whatever we can to preserve it, right?
And I think a lot of people in the industry forget the real profound link between food and civilization, right? I feel like sometimes there's almost a Disneylandification of food. Like, okay, this is your standard fare. Let's throw it into a package tour. Get to try some delicacies in this, but it's not really an insight into the culture unless you dig deeper and take them to the markets. You know, all civilizations were built around the quest for creating food. This is the Neolithic revolution. We became from hunter-gatherers. We started agriculture, and civilizations were built around this. So food is so integral to any culture and any civilization. And I think, I don't know, I would like to hear your thoughts on this about how can we tangibly attract tourists to go to the markets, to go to the farms, to take those cooking classes, you know?
I mean, that's what the tourism specialists around here, you know, I place a lot of responsibility on the hospitality industry, on the hotels you live in, that you stay in, for instance. I mean, be a part of that journey, be a part of that whole package, right? I have a real big gripe when I go to a certain hotel in a particular country. And this is why often I actually choose to go Airbnb. Sorry, guys. And I'll tell you why. And if you as a hotel can replicate this, then I might go back to the hotel. When you're in a hotel in a certain country, it could be, let's not throw brands out there, but it could be any hotel. There is a certain global sort of branding stamp that you have to have this level of this type of fruit in your hotel. Everybody has to have apple, oranges, and kiwi fruit. Doesn't matter where you are. I was in India recently, and we went to Perry's Corner in Chennai, which is this madness. It's wholesale markets. It's anything and everything you can find that's in season. What drew me to this gentleman's little stall was the sweet, pungent, beautiful, pungent sort of fragrance of pink guava. It just permeates you, and you can't help but be drawn to it. You know, it's like the cartoon where you're actually floating towards it. And the most beautiful pink flesh. And I asked the chef at the hotel I was staying in, why don't you have your beautiful pink guava? Why don't you have your super ripe Indian mangoes? You know, why do you have apples that you imported all the way from Australia? You know. And his answer to me, that's because our guests want it. And I threw it back at him and I said, well, maybe you need to tell them they should try this. Try the guava, try the locally grown, gorgeous fruit that we've got in India, and we're so proud of it. And so it's as much our responsibility as a service provider to actually educate our customers, isn't it?
Yes, and also to help in turn support the local market.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not buying imported apples or imported oranges. You're buying from the local farmer
Yeah.
the fruit in season. And you know, it's I think it's also about the curious traveler as
Yes.
well, and educating the traveler, and maybe having both options. You know, you can still have your apples and oranges, but perhaps next to it you have rambutan and lychee and all these other fruit
Options, correct.
Exactly.
I want to share with you a story about a food tour that I created for a client for a core group, and they said, Audra, can you create a 4-day culinary tour in Singapore? And I said, I have full reign of how this is going to go and where we're going to go. And they said, yep, whatever you want, right? So on the introduction night, I said to everyone, the two things that we're not going to do is we're not going to have chili crab, and we're not going to go on Orchard Road, because you know how to get that, and I'm going to show you everything else. So for 4 days, we ate nonstop. We went to all my favorite haunts. We went to places that I grew up eating, beautiful masala dosa, and I made everyone eat with their hands. Nobody had forks, knives, spoons, nothing, you know, and that everyone had henna done. We also, on the first night, we went and had fish head steamboat. And can I tell you, if you have two 70-year-olds from rural Victoria, that the first time in Asia, she had a heart attack. But by the end of the 4th day, she was a different person, and she came over and thanked me, and she said, you know, in my 70 years of living on this planet, I'm so thankful that you pushed me a little bit over the edge to experience something I would have never gone on my own. So your guide, you know, the local guides are so important.
They are.
To showcase what you're so proud of. And that lovely gentleman over there that asked us about local cuisine, can you take us out for dinner tonight?
Yes, where can we eat?
Show us what the local cuisine is, right? Excellent, done, 7 p.m. Right.
So I want to share an example in Singapore. Singapore Tourism Board, bless them, I love them. I was the editor of Olive magazine a couple of years ago, and they took me on this 1-week food tour of Singapore. And you know, STB, they like their heavy schedules. They fed me from morning to evening, most of the time in like all these Michelin-starred restaurants. I actually had a nice talk with Dr. Leslie Tay, some Nonya food, but it was just one thing after another. And then my driver, I had the same driver all week, and I said, where do you eat breakfast? And he says, are you sure, ma'am? I'm like, yes, where do you eat breakfast? Took me to Little India, small little store in front of that famous department store.
Mustafa.
Exactly. And they have the best roti prata with like the roti with the fish head curry for breakfast. And that was the best meal I had that entire trip. Michelin star chefs be damned. That was the most flavorful, authentic, and it was nice. We sat down, we ate breakfast together. He told me, don't tell STB, they will get mad at me that I bring you here. I said, no, this is great. And it was such a wonderful experience. And I think as in the industry, we should encourage people to be a little afraid and go out of the box, right? It's okay to step out of the comfort zone.
I think, Stephanie, when we talk about sustainable gastronomic tourism, I mean, it's really about, there can be basic, simple ingredients, simple food, but there can also be Michelin stars. It really doesn't matter what it is. The fact of the matter is what makes a particular country so unique, and that is what really should be shouted out, you know? I mean, if we look at places like Japan, so I'm currently planning a family holiday in Japan. It's not easy when you've got 2 teenage boys that want to do their own thing. Mom's not cool anymore. But things like preserving, we're going to be doing the Nakasendo Trail, which is basically the trail that was part of the walk from Tokyo between Tokyo and Kyoto during the Edo period. And so but what's most important out of that trail is it's been preserved so well, so you still get to experience what it was like back in the day. But not only that, you get to stay in homestays where you get super authentic Japanese food, home-cooked food, and you get the whole Japanese experience. It's phenomenal. The Kumano Kodo is something else I really wanted to do.
Scott's done this, Kumano Kodo.
Amazing. I was just talking to Stephen before about Laos. Unbeknown to me, there's so much all over the world that actually taps into local production of food. You know, people grow their own vegetables. You can actually experience it. You go foraging for mushrooms in the that grows wild in the vicinity. You experience craft. All of that, you know, local coffees grown and brewed, and that's what enriches you as a traveler, you know. Sure, we have travelers that don't want that, you know.
It's okay.
You can't satisfy everyone, but at least if we can make the effort to kind of push the agenda that you go to Japan because you want to experience something that's quite authentic, and you'll come back a much more knowledgeable person, much more satisfied, and experience something that you've never experienced in your life. How incredible is that? That's a happy traveler.
It is. Well, our time is up. Thank you so much, Audra. I think if there's one insight that we've learned here today is that we'll travel for food. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Always.
we'll travel for food,
Always.
and it is the best way into a culture and a country. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thanks,
Yes.
Steph.